Now, we're talking here on Take Action News about the mainstream media, in particular NBC, and some of their failings. There was another failing that was pointed out by Salon, and that is the work of Chuck Todd and other journalists for the way that Salon suggested they hyped the early stages of the IRS scandal. This is when it first came out that some IRS agents were going after Tea Party groups, reviewing the records, determining whether or not they were applying for tax-exempt status when they really perhaps didn't deserve it, and were being singled out for scrutiny. Here's how Chuck Todd described this on NBC Nightly News, and this was coming after some new developments, some new revelations about Benghazi. So you're going to hear anchor Brian Williams talk to Chuck Todd. First, he'd make a reference to Benghazi revelations and then to the IRS scandal. Listen to this.
So, Chuck, Benghazi continues to blow up around them, and it's not like the IRS has a lot of fans already. People do not like hearing the whiff of it being used for political purposes.
No, because it harkens back to a Nixonian-type tactic, if you will, a political tactic.
It harkens back to a Nixonian-type political tactic. I have a feeling that Chuck was referring to people's perceptions, a whiff of sort of scandal, not to whether the Obama White House was actually involved in Nixonian type of tactics, but clearly Chuck was not clear enough about that because he got hammered for it by Salon, which has pointed out that this entire sort of claim House perhaps controlling the IRS or using the IRS to go after political enemies turns out not to be true. There's no evidence whatsoever that the White House was using the IRS for this, despite some of the conspiracy theories and Republican talking points put out early on. There's no evidence to support it. In fact, all of the evidence suggests that the White House only found out about the activities of the IRS agents shortly before the public did. So the question then becomes, okay, Chuck Todd has gotten hammered. We reached out to Chuck Todd for response because the Salon says that he and other reporters blew the IRS scandal, and what Chuck Todd tweeted back was that they are cherry-picking some of his reportings, and Chuck added the phrase, whatever. Daniel Marins, is that a fair response by Chuck that he's being cherry-picked, and I think, again, I think that Chuck was trying to refer to Brian Williams' question about the whiff of scandal, the whiff of these activities, not the actual activities by the Obama administration, but nonetheless, what do you make of it?
David, I'm actually going to, believe it or not, I think that Chuck Todd may have a point here in the sense that, that statement that we just played, I think that it's a little bit ambiguous as to what he was referring to in terms of the Nixonian adjective there. But I think look, again, I mean, someone like Chuck Todd, it's sort of like, you peons, I don't really need to sort of really engage what you're saying. Big deal, I used a word too lightly. And look, first of all, I think that the phrase Nixonian is something that people should take very seriously. I mean, this is a president who would have been thrown out of office had he not resigned, and is considered one of the sort of the biggest violators of the Constitution in American history. And certainly took that to new heights in the executive. Look, the pattern here is that in terms of going after people too hard, right? In terms of David Gregory, let's say, going after the Obama administration in that way, I mean, that's, I think, what he was trying to do, is he was trying to seem tough on Obama, on the White House. Mm-hmm. The tax line item, well, that's there, and we all know about that. So isn't it kind of hypocritical that they're sort of slow peddling this employer mandate in the exchanges? And then with Chuck Todd sort of saying, like, well, abuse of power is abuse of power, and it looks like, the White House, this stinks a little bit of Nixonian behavior here. These are easy targets to take on, to be able to say, both sides are doing it, both sides are wrong, rather than taking on, let's say, what I think is a hard thing to be able to say, which is that when one side is more wrong, when one side has a bigger point, when corporate America's wrong, when the wealthy are wrong, that is what, to me, is really challenging the status quo, is sort of cutting through the cliches, doing the hard research, and I think that these guys like to seem like they're sort of hard-charging, grilling interviewers and reporters, and so they take a relatively soft target or a relatively easy assertion to make, and that's what sort of stands in for, I think, really courageous journalism.
I agree 100%. And in fact, again, I've said it before, I wish that somebody like like Glenn Greenwald would get one of these sort of venerable institutions, whether it's Meet the Press, or I'd love to see Glenn Greenwald in the front row of the White House, briefing room, asking questions on behalf of a network. To me, that would really, that's a guy who's proven he does his research, he works extremely hard, and he gets it right. And I think the sort of flippant use of either cliches or terms to try to, whether it's generate an audience by suggesting that something's Nixonian here, even if it's just sort of muddled, and that's not what Chuck meant to say about the Obama White House. But just, you're right. I mean, throwing in that term, it helps you perhaps with ratings because it suggests drama, which is what helps with the nightly newscast when they can say something dramatic is happening. But it's unfair, and I would just suggest to all of my colleagues, and I'm not singling out Chuck or anybody here, and I hold this for myself as well. There's a burden that we all have as journalists to be a little bit more nuanced, to understand the complexities, to do our homework. If we don't do our homework and we get things wrong, A, that shouldn't happen, but B, we should apologize. I think David Gregory should apologize, and I think it's incumbent upon all of us to be more careful and to make sure that if we're going to talk about something, you damn well better know what you're talking about. And if you're going to suggest that something is Nixonian, you better be perfectly clear about what exactly you are talking about and be able to show the sort of nuance and provide the sort of complexity that I think these issues deserve, because otherwise you're not really doing anybody any favors in terms of your purported journalism. That's all I'll say. And I hold myself to the same standard. I've made these mistakes before. I've gotten some things. I haven't been as precise as I should have been, and I beat myself up more than anybody. I just hope that my journalism colleagues are doing the same. Coming up, How It Should Be with Daniel Marins on the other side of this break. You're listening and watching the Take Action News.